A lot of times I think anxiety is your body's way of trying to give you a little bit of a hint that something's out of whack and you should pay attention to it. But what many of us do is we bury that with alcohol or other things that numb.
Welcome to another episode of the MindHack podcast, where we dive deep into the minds of thought leaders, innovators, and experts in human potential. I'm your host, Cody McLean, and today we're exploring a powerful and transformative journey that bridges the worlds of military service, corporate leadership, and cutting-edge wellness practices. Our guest today is Neil Markey, the co-founder and CEO of Beckley Retreats, an organization that's pioneering the use of psychedelics in modern therapy. Neil's path is anything but conventional, from serving as a captain in the U.S. Special Operations to navigating the intense demands of corporate life at McKinsey & Co., to ultimately finding healing and purpose through mindfulness and psychedelics. In today's episode, we'll discuss Neil's incredible journey, the groundbreaking work he's doing at Beckley Retreats, and the unique intersection of science, spirituality, and mental health. We'll explore how Neil's experiences have shaped his approach to well-being, the challenges and rewards of leading a mission-driven organization, and future of psychedelics and therapy. Whether you're curious about the potential of psychedelics, looking for insights on maintaining well-being in a high-pressure world, or just interested in hearing from someone who's truly walked the walk, this episode is for you. So let's dive in and uncover the secrets to well-being with Neil Markey. Neil, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Cody.
So I'd love to ask, you have such a fascinating story that you went from serving in the U.S. Army Special Operations, which I would love for you to even say what that is, and you went from that to mindfulness and psychedelics. Can you share what catalyzed this incredible shift?
Yeah, it wasn't a straight line, but the short story is I joined the service after 9/11, thinking I was doing the right thing. By the time I got through school and training and ended up at my unit and went to Iraq, we learned that the weapons of mass destruction narrative that the country was telling itself was wildly wrong. So that was pretty challenging. And I was in Iraq in '07 and then got a chance to go try out for this small special operations unit called the Ranger Regiment and went to Afghanistan twice with them. And, I was fortunate. I didn't have near as bad of a series of deployments as a lot of guys, for sure. I had an infantry platoon in Iraq, but when I was in the Rangers, I was more of a support officer. So I was removed from the worst of it. But that unit, the entire unit had complex PTSD. And this was the guys that was doing the night raids, and it was a brutal few years. And I got out in 2012 and went to graduate school, and by some measures was doing well professionally. I was at a good school, and that first year you're looking for summer internships, and I was doing well, and I was isolating and drinking too much alcohol and going through a breakup with my partner and having a lot of mental health issues, many of which came from the transition out of the service. And I got introduced to meditation through this course at Columbia University. And then I had the chance to have some psychedelic experiences. And for me, it felt like those experiences in some way accelerated what I was trying to do with meditation. And that was in 2012 I got out. And between then and now, it's been a windy journey in and out of the corporate world. And but now I feel like I'm really working on something that is in alignment with my values and I believe in, and I think we're helping people. And so I feel really, really fortunate to have found something that lights me up.
What was the motivating factor? If you came out of the Army, you were lucky enough not to have too many traumatic experiences, and then you went to school, and then you went to McKinsey, of all places, which it seems like you went from one incredibly stressful environment to another.
Yeah.
Can you share what was your reasoning? Why did you take this path?
Probably quite a bit of ego. Um, I didn't know what McKinsey was when I got to grad school. It's just everyone else wanted to do it.
Mm,
And so then I started finding out more about it, and it was the sexy thing. And so I chased that. And there's a bit of a pattern that I have, I think, of getting myself into kind of stressful environments, but at least I'm aware of it now.
mhm.
Before it was a little bit more mindless. I'm grateful for all those experiences, but those are definitely between the Rangers and McKinsey. It's hard to maintain positive mental health when you're living that way.
Yeah. I've known many people who in college, it seems it's still, you got to work at one of the big five and
Yeah.
you want to make your parents proud. You go into that and then you just see what your existence is like. Your whole
Yeah.
world is evolving around this company. You're working way too many hours. You have no time for yourself. And it seems like I mean, even John Oliver did an episode on that a few months ago.
Oh,
And
I know. It was good and bad.
now,
It stung. It's true.
And so going from one environment to another that was stressful, I'm wondering if there is a linkage between, is there perhaps like an addiction or a tendency for those in society if you're in a stressful environment and then you get out of that? Like I can only imagine coming out of the military, what it would feel like to go from that environment where you always have to be on and now all of a sudden you have none of that stress. Did you experience any side effects or symptoms that perhaps relegated your jump to working at McKinsey?
So I got to grad school in 2012, was struggling quite a bit. Had my first kind of entrepreneurial venture with my brother. We started a business together. And I also, this is when I got into meditation and trying to learn different ways to take better care of myself. And over the course of 3 years of school, I did a dual program. I actually ended up in a pretty good place, like much more peaceful, sleeping well, positive, not, this was a lot of work. It took a lot of effort. And after grad school, I ended up being so interested in meditation that I went to Jefferson University and did a teacher certification in meditation, and then was teaching meditation and working on this small business with my brother. And my mental health was great. It was probably the best I can remember it being, from my childhood. But I was deferring this job offer with McKinsey and Company. And basically I asked for another deferral to kick it another year down the road so I could keep kind of doing what I was doing. And McKinsey said, no, we're not going to be your permanent backup plan. And so then I had a decision whether I was like, go or don't go. And I wanted to see behind the curtain, people put this organization on such a pedestal. The curiosity killed me. And I went there and I don't regret it. But after going there, then you realize, then you're in it. And so is there, I think there's some truth to people. I mean, they've studied this a bit, people that have trauma in their past end up in relationships and environments sometimes that can not be the most healthy for them. And there's some theories out there around why. I guess you could probably put me in that bucket. But I think it was also just an ego thing to some extent. I mean, I went to the Rangers because it was what everybody thought was cool and hard. And I wanted to prove something to people and maybe myself too. And I think the same for McKinsey. I wanted to show people I was smart enough or good enough, or looking outside for validation, which I've learned over the years is not a particularly fruitful path, but sometimes it takes us longer to learn it. It's taken me, I'd say I'm still learning it. I still have to correct for those tendencies, haven't fully figured it out.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important things is to admit, we will probably never have it figured out. And those that claim to are probably not the ones we want to turn to. Your story, it reminds me a little bit of my friend Matt Wilson, who's a co-founder of Under 30 Experiences, which he founded in 2012 when he went on a trip to Iceland and he was working as an investment banker in New York City. and he just realized how incredibly unhappy he was and that he wanted to get out and see the world. And then he started this under 30 traveling group to help others who can help them see the world as well. And it seems like you went from working at McKinsey to then going to private equity.
So I went into McKinsey doing pretty well. I was taking good care of myself. I had a pretty disciplined meditation practice. I was spending a lot of time in nature. I had been working on things that I really was aligned with from a values perspective, was around my family, like all these things, pillars of wellness. I think I was doing a good job. Well, then I got to McKinsey and um, like most things in life, it's not black or white. But I had a more challenging experience at McKinsey than maybe some do. And part of me loved it. It was so stimulating, right? And for a lower middle class kid from a small town in Maryland to then all of a sudden be at this super prestigious place and staying at the Ritz-Carlton, that was cool for a while. It did give me a little dopamine bump for sure. I was pretty proud of that. But over the course of a few years there, although I did well by the metrics that they have in terms of performance, my mental health started to slip. And I think now maybe I could go back into an environment like that and I could have boundaries and I could stay centered. And I've developed enough discipline around my habits that I think I could do it. But at that point, I just hadn't learned enough. I hadn't gotten strong enough. And you want to do well and you're around all these other people that want to do really well. And it creates this hyper competitive environment that's almost like a frantic existence of who's going to be outperform who. And so after a few years there, I was pretty unhappy, right? You get in this cycle, you're not sleeping well, you're maybe, using alcohol more than you should, or people are taking different prescription drugs to get up in the morning and go to sleep at night. The cycle that many are in. And so I was looking to leave McKinsey, but there's some sayings around this. It's like, you never want to run away from something. You want to run towards something. And I don't know if I took enough time to really figure out what I wanted to do or what I was running away from. And I got this job offer from this boutique consultancy that was a bunch of ex-McKinsey people that was doing restructurings. And I took it because it was like even more prestigious in some ways than McKinsey and more money. So I wouldn't say it was the right value alignment in terms of my rationale for going there. And I went there and that was even worse. And then over the course of a few years there, things started, things continued to kind of unwind to at the end, before I left, although I did well by their metrics, I was in almost as bad a place as I was coming out of the service. And I was just self-aware enough to be like, what the heck are you doing? Like, you made so much progress and now you're back. And I was looking at a lot of my peers who, a lot of the folks that are in that industry come from wealthy families and they have really good educations. And a lot of them have similar symptoms. And I got to this kind of, breaking point where I was like, I'm just fed up with it. And I left and I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew I wasn't going to do that anymore. And then through that transition is how I ended up working on what I'm working on now, which I think is a complex environment, which is funny and ironic, but at least at the core, I think we're really helping people, and that to me is, everything's a give and take and there's trade-offs, but as so long as I can feel really good about the work, I'm okay with hard work. I like hard work.
Was there a specific moment within your journey that you came to have that conscious awareness that you were just very unhappy with things or unhappy with the direction of your life? And I'm sure, have you seen others? I'm sure you've worked with people, whether they were in the organizations that you were in at the time or current clients, where there's this general disdain for where they are now, but yet they feel stuck and they're not
Yeah.
really sure what to do. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that or if you have any advice to somebody else in a similar situation.
Yeah. Well, your body knows, and a lot of times I think anxiety is your body's way of trying to give you a little bit of a hint that something's out of whack and you should pay attention to it. But what many of us do is we bury that with alcohol or other things that numb.
Right.
And that was me. And then, yeah, it kind of hit me. I mean, I had another, when I got out of the service, I went through a divorce. And so that was it was terrible. It was terrible. And she was an amazing woman. And I wasn't a good, present, kind, loving man in that relationship. And that's like been one of the hardest things I've had to forgive myself for, frankly. But that came from my state of being at the time, this traumatized state. I just wasn't able to do it. And at the end of the PE job, I ruined another relationship, I would say. And I was chasing money. I think you can get into this loop where you're super stressed and busy and you're making money, and then you try and soothe yourself or fill in the gaps with stuff, bigger house, car, all these things. But that doesn't really fill you up. It's a little dopamine boost. It's like eating sugar. It's like very temporary, but then sugar will leave you more hungry than you were before because it's not filling up your spirit or whatever you want to call it. It's not wholesome. And I took this role at this company that was headquartered out of Florida, and I was by myself. They paid for this place for me, and there was a period of time where I was living on the beach in this big home, but then going through a breakup with my partner, no friends around, and just like completely empty. Mm-hmm. And I hated the work. I hated what we were doing, and I was just waking up miserable. And so, yeah, I mean, the signals were the sleeplessness and the anxiety and the unwell. You start to, for me, I mean, everybody kind of has their own tendencies they go to when they're not well, but I isolate. It was all the same things that I was going through when I got out of the service. And then I kind of saw that and, finally just made a decision to leave.
So you knew something wasn't right, and you wanted to change something within your life. Can you explain the narrative from how you went from that moment to then co-founding a retreat institute that helps people overcome their own issues?
Yeah. Well, in that last role I had, the one saving grace was my boss, the CEO at the time. So I led the restructuring as a consultant and then got offered a job to be on the executive team, which was this big promotion. It was a $500 million company. I was in my mid-30s. So it was like, by most measures, it's like, oh, wow, Neil's doing great. Well, I was struggling with the work we were doing because it was restructuring and it was just toxic, and the company was teetering and there was just a lot of infighting. But the CEO was a really great guy. And he believed in me and he gave me this opportunity and I took it. And then I had a relatively contentious relationship with my peer, who was the CFO, who was 15 years older than me, never thought that I should have the job because I was too young. And we had a little bit of a pretty open, contentious relationship. And I just wasn't I was in a different mode then where I was not being as empathetic and patient as I can be. And then the CEO ended up leaving and the CFO became the CEO. So then he was my boss instead of my peer. And it was just like, okay, this is just went from pretty bad to completely untenable. It was a nightmare. And so that was just, it wasn't going to work. And so then I left and I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just had been well before. I'd seen a different way of being and living, and I got back to meditating regularly. I had the space to do it. And I ended up in Mexico with some friends and just trying to get away from the madness and spend time in nature and learning how to surf. And I was teaching meditation in Mexico just as a hobby. And I had been on some psychedelic programs over the years myself. I was paying attention to what was going on in the news and watching all the investment come in. And then friends of mine started coming down to spend time. And the Huichol is in this town. The Huichol is a local indigenous community in Mexico that has been using psychedelics for thousands of years, and they're really accessible. And so I was having friends come down and was connecting them with the Huichol, and they were doing their sessions and going back home and meditating on the beach. And then, yeah, it happened really organically, which I think is a really good signal. It just started kind of presenting itself. I was like, well, why don't I just do this in some way? I'm not as concerned about trying to make as much money anymore. In that transition from my corporate job, I sold my house, I sold my car, I got rid of all my stuff. I was like, I don't need this stuff. And I had this really simple life with nothing, in Mexico, and was happier than I had been in years. And so I was like, is there an opportunity for me to make a living doing something that I love? And so I started to bat this idea around with friends of mine. I kind of wrote out a thesis or a business plan and started sending it to people. And a lot of people at that time were like, you're gonna burn bridges to the professional world, but if this is what you want to do, then do it. And then you're an entrepreneur, this, it's these early ventures, it feels like you're spinning wheels. Is this going to work? It's not going to work. You're super passionate about it. It's so frustrating. And then something happens. You meet someone, you get some big contract, and then it's a step change, and then it becomes something dramatically different, sometimes like overnight. And that for me was meeting this woman, Amanda Fielding, and her family. And it was the most serendipitous connection. I mean, they were wanting to build an organization that was going to do these long form programs, the kind of non-clinical for the betterment of the well. They wanted to do it in a really conscious way. They wanted to be a bit of a counter to some of the fast money that was coming into the space and running these PE med playbooks, trying to get as much money as fast as possible. They're like, no, there's something here, but we can do it in a more thoughtful way. And I was a young entrepreneur that was looking for some resources and a brand. And when you overlaid kind of how they were thinking about it, what their vision was with what I was starting to sketch out, it was like complete match.
Mm.
And so we just kind of got started, and it's coming up on 4 years.
And so can you explain what Beckley Retreats does exactly? Who's your ideal client, and how do you guys help people?
Yeah, we run integrative health programs, well-being programs that use psychedelics as a catalyst or an accelerant for change, help people make really positive change in their lives. And we run programs in Jamaica and the Netherlands. It's the two places where we can use mushrooms or truffles in the Netherlands, which have the active component of psilocybin, completely legally, out in the open, no gray area, complications. We're insured, it's all above board. And, we teach people how to take better care of themselves. So we teach people these basic well-being practices. We teach meditation, mindful movement, different breathwork exercises. We looked at what was happening in the industry broadly, and there's some amazing people out there doing amazing things for sure. And it's the wild, wild west. I mean, there's some really fly-by-night operations out there that aren't doing any screening. There's no checks on the facilitators. There's no checks on the mushrooms. There's no follow-up. There's no thoughtfulness to it. They're just trying to make money. And we said, let's professionalize this. Let's be thoughtful about this. And so we looked at adult learning. We looked at habit change science. We looked at integrative health. We looked at what was happening in the clinical environments in the United States. We looked at what was happening in the indigenous communities where people have been using these plants, and said, maybe these folks that have been doing this for a couple thousand years have something to teach us that the Western medical system might not fully understand yet. And we kind of packaged that into a comprehensive program that has this digital preparation portion that you can do from anywhere in the world, and then has a immersive portion that happens on site in those locations, and then has a digital follow-up because really ultimately what we want is habit change. We want behavior change. We want it to stick. We don't want to just give someone a experience and then it fades. We want to help people learn new ways to be. And our guests, man, it's a fascinating group of people. 14% of our guests have PhDs, which I think in the
Wow.
United States, it's like 1 or 2%. And a lot of them are really high performers. So business executives, we just had the former COO of Disney World come through. We had one of the most senior partners from McKinsey and Company come through. And so it's people that are generally well. We screen out severe indications. It's people that are looking to make change, to develop better connection, to think more creatively, more strategically, to learn how to take better care of themselves, to develop more of a spiritual connection, more connection with nature, become more empathetic. It's these go from good to actualization, or learn
Right.
at least the direction.
Something I want to touch on that you mentioned earlier is that there's a lot of fly-by-night operations, as you said. And there was recently an article, I'm not sure if it was in Vox, it came up a few weeks ago, and it was an in-depth article that looked at operations, especially in Costa Rica, that used Ibogaine as a treatment. So, we have psilocybin mushrooms, we have ayahuasca, Ibogaine, and surely there's a few other DMT, etc. But with Ibogaine in particular, there was a death at one of these retreats.
Yeah.
It was somebody who ended up having, he was getting off of opioids and he had kind of a cardiac condition from that. I think Ibogaine kind of interacted with that and they didn't do the proper medical screening prior. And he ended up dying at 1 or 2 days later after the initial full treatment. And that article really brought to light that, as you said, it's kind of like the wild, wild west to some degree, is that the article seemed to infer that there were operations that were purely in this simply for the money, and they were just trying to maximize the amount of revenue and profit that they're able to derive from this. And these clinics operate in areas where it's kind of like a gray area, so to speak, where maybe these drugs are not legal, but they're not illegal. But I'm
Right.
wondering if you know anything about that, and if you might want to elaborate on what is the danger here with somebody trying to find a retreat to heal themselves and how they might avoid a situation like that.
Yeah, it's tragic. So I heard about this. I haven't looked into it, so I don't know a lot of the details. I just got an email about it just a couple days ago. Um, and Ibogaine, I would say in some ways is in a league of its own. It has a pretty unique cardiac risk. And so that needs to be dealt with in a whole different level of care. Like I said, I don't know the details of this particular one, but I'm a big believer in Ibogaine generally. And there's some really good operations out there. And for some severe conditions like complex PTSD or severe addictions, there's a Stanford study that just came out, and I've seen it personally impact many, many veterans. It's profound. And from a pharmacological standpoint, if you listen to the scientists talk about it, they'll say, we've never seen anything like it. It has mechanisms of action that we've never seen. So there's tremendous potential.
Right. I think, like, say somebody, if you have a chronic opioid addiction or even alcohol, there's instances of people having one Ibogaine treatment and they just wake up and they just have no interest.
No
It
interest.
just,
Yeah.
it's
It does
amazing.
some deep level of reset. But like I said, you need to be hooked up you need to have doctors and you need to have the right kind of cardiac care around it. But I think the biggest thing is, well, how we think about safety, maybe we think about it through the whole kind of program life cycle, and the things that I think that we do really well that are really important is screening, so God bless the people that are out there dealing with opioid use, and getting people that are near suicide. That's important work. And that's a whole different level than what we're doing, where we're screening out that severe indications because we're trying to manage for a positive group dynamic. And we're also trying to mitigate risk. And, that heavy work is tough on the teams too. My God, it's it's important work, but it's different than what we're doing. So I think screening is really important, and people educating themselves on whether they're a fit, what risk factors they have, and what risks are involved in these compounds. We do a preparation portion, so we're teaching people how to manage these experiences, developing some of the basic well-being practices that we think are helpful in people being able to have a more meaningful and positive experience. We screen our facilitators, we train our facilitators. Because we operate in a fully legal environment, we're able to test the compounds that we use chemically, and our facilitators test them. On site, a lot of psychonauts will say something around the psychedelic is less than 50% of the experience. More is the set and the setting, where you are, who you're with, why you're doing it, right? And this is where, for mushrooms at least, unlike Ibogaine, if you screen, generally they're quite safe, they're non-toxic, looks like they're neuroregenerative. Where people get themselves into these bad situations is they take them unknowingly or in the wrong situation, and then they have this dramatic perception stuff, and it scares the heck out of them. But you can mitigate all that. If you teach people what's going to happen, and you give them, make sure there's good facilitators, then you can kind of minimize the possibility of a traumatic experience.
Right.
Where people still have challenging experiences pretty regularly, but that's part of it. And then having, you want to have facilitators that have been doing this work for a long time. So they've seen different outcomes and know how to manage it. And if something goes a little sideways, they don't become panicked. And you want to have an organization that has well-documented safety standards like you'd expect at a hospital. Like if something goes wrong, then this is what happens. And you want to make sure that there's access to medical treatment. We always have a nurse on site, and, access to local medical facilities. And then, on the back end, we're staying in touch with people. It's, it's limited what you can do digitally, but you can still be a resource for people and make sure that they have what they need and connect them with additional services if they need it. So, we kind of think about it across the entire time. We have someone in one of our longer programs, but I think people should, it's relative risk, and it's what's the risk versus what's the benefit. And I think that if everybody's different, but you got to kind of do that calculation on your own. But for many people, I would say that doing psilocybin in a controlled environment with highly trained people in a structured program, is there risk? Yes. But what's that risk relative to going out and drinking alcohol with your friends, or taking maybe too big of a edible by yourself that you bought at the smoke shop, or taking prescription drugs, so and I think that what we need to do as an industry is help people have the resources to be able to make that eyes wide open decision. And then, hey, we're adults, and I think people should have access to these potentially profound experiences, so long as there's no, we're not hiding things. We're not telling people that there's not risks, or that this is going to 100% change their life. And, those types of things. We're not baiting and switching. We're being honest.
And so as an insider, there's a lot of other retreats and companies doing this nowadays. Is there any reliable source or way that people might try to evaluate whether the retreat that they're finding is right for them? Because I think particularly on yours or any others, often these retreats, they're thousands of dollars. And I think not a lot of people can obviously afford them. You mentioned the previous executive at Disney. Is this something that is a more affordable solution okay? Or are they often more likely to make cheap cuts that are likely to result in a worse outcome? And just how can somebody properly evaluate an organization or a retreat?
Yeah. I mean, I would try and get people on the phone, have your questions and ask about the training of their facilitators, ask about the access to medical facilities, ask about the sources of the mushrooms and how they test the mushrooms, and get an understanding of the leadership team and what's their backgrounds and how long have they been doing it and why have they been doing it, and is where they're doing it legal, because if they're doing stuff in places that's not legal, well, that's not necessarily a nail in the coffin, but it's a check in the wrong column. In my opinion. Is the company insured? You do have to do more research for these types of experiences because there's no central governing body. When you go into a hospital in the United States, there's, organizations out there that are doing checks and balances, right? But that's not happening. So you have to check yourself if this company is holding themselves in check and has the right things in place. But there are some good ones out there. And then on your question around cost, it was a decision for us to stay a bit on the higher end and not try and find cost savings to bring the price down, and then fix the accessibility option through scholarships and financial aid, which we do quite a bit of and are doing more and more of. But could you have an experience like this for less money than a 5-night kind of all-inclusive at a estate in Jamaica? For sure. The mushrooms are cheap, and people do it all the time. But I think our guests, we're not trying to be everything for everyone. We're looking for people that are really taking this seriously, want to do it legally, want to do it as part of a program where they're going to really learn something and develop some skills and get a lot out of it. And I think we're kind of happy to stay in that lane.
And did you say that you do these in group sessions?
Yeah, all of our programs, and we really believe in this too. You can have a psychedelic experience in one-on-one or by yourself or in a clinic, and we're supporters of that. I think if you look at the data, it's encouraging. But for us, the group matters. And definitely some of what we're correcting for some of these people, is the fact that we lead these very disconnected transactional existences, and we find tremendous value, and our guests find tremendous value in doing it alongside other people. And I think because of, I don't know, there's probably lots of reasons. But the folks that we're attracting, it's people that are really taking it seriously. And we've yet to have a single issue where there was like a really bad apple on a program. It's people that are generally are really like thoughtful. They're doing this as an investment in themselves and they want to be better versions of themselves. And so if you get groups that are all coming in with those similar intentions and coming in from that same place, then it works really well. I think in the West, in a lot of ways, some of our mental health challenges is we're too indexed on self. We're sitting there in a constant loop reflecting on our state, and not all cultures are like that, And then you go into a psychotherapist's office in the United States, and then they're like, well, you're already thinking about yourself too much. And they're like, well, think about yourself from this angle. So they're almost like reinforcing this self-assessment loop that is part of the problem. It's the mind is too overactive and you need to just like go be and stop dissecting everything, like that's part of the problem. And so when you bring a group of people together and you get them in a group and they go around and they share, they see that it's not just them that's having these challenges, it's everybody. And then you have like a late stage cancer patient come down and talk about they have 6 more months to live. And you've got your 45, 50-year-old executive that's woe is me because I can't find meaning. And they hear the cancer patient say that they're about to die. It kind of like, whoa, boom, It puts things in perspective. And we all need that. We need to see that it's not just us and it's a lot of the challenges that many of us are going through. It's just part of the human existence and it's okay. And you don't have to sweat it so much. And I think you can only really do that in a group. Like the one-on-one kind of clinician patient dynamic is really good in a lot of ways. And, it'll never go away. And there's there's definitely use cases for it. But healing in groups with other human beings, supporting each other as peers, has a lot of value, a tremendous amount of value. And my argument would be it can be even more cost effective too, if we really think about scale and like, how do you get this work to more people safely? I think what we hope to do is we're a bit more higher price now because it's not cheap what we're doing in Jamaica, and there's tons of setup costs, and it's just not inexpensive to run these programs the way that we do. And we're also still learning. But I think we have a vision where there's more offerings that maybe aren't at locations that are as premium, and there's more of an apprentice model with the facilitators, and we're offering a very similar experience, but it's more community based and much, much less expensive and much, much more accessible. But that'll just like take some time. We've got to kind of build into that.
And what kinds of expectations might people have that say that you've seen or that perhaps they should have? Because I've personally seen this idea of, as psychedelics has become more mainstream, that many people tend to look at it initially as like a panacea to a lot of the issues that they're encountering in life. And my view, it's shifted to seeing psychedelics as just like anything, just like therapy, just like counseling, having like a job that you like, eating the right foods, exercising. It's like a tool. And I think
Exactly.
there's been too much weight and expectation that can perhaps be put into it. And so, what do you tell your clients who are about to come on the retreat? And are you familiar with any experiences that people have had where perhaps they had too much of an expectation and then they didn't get what they were hoping to get out of it?
Yeah, I think this is a really important point too. It's again, we're kind of conditioned to want to be able to have a quick fix and take a pill and that it'll fix us on its own, but that's not how these compounds work. They are a tool or an accelerant in many ways, but you have to show up. And what'll often happen is you can have this really profound experience, and then for some period of time after the experience, you might have this like glow, and you'll notice that your perspectives are just different. And we'll have people say things like, I just realized that my life is beautiful. Like, it's amazing. Why didn't I realize that before? And they'll just have like these moments throughout the days where they're just like grateful. And that's super positive, right? Or they'll say, it's something my wife used to annoy me. And now it doesn't like get in my body or central nervous system. I see it, and then I just let it be. Like, why am I going to get annoyed about that? So all these like positive ways of being. But the thing, that we're really clear on from the beginning is like, that's just the opening. You've got to kind of show up, and you've got to like work with that opening, and you've got to practice things, or the likelihood is you will revert back, because by the time you get to be a young adult, so much of how we're showing up in the world are these deeply rooted patterns in our psyche. And there's a lot of momentum there. It's like a rut in the road that's been worn so deep. Like, and you got to make conscious effort to lay in some new patterns, or you're going to go back, and, and so these compounds are profound tools, but they take work, and in some ways we don't understand the brain super well. We don't understand the central nervous system super well. We're theorizing, but what it seems like is happening in some ways is these experiences are in some ways bringing some of these traumas or experiences that are deep in us in some ways to the surface. And that can actually be a bit disorienting. It can be a bit scary to kind of relive something or be confronted with something that you've had tucked away in a box neatly for quite some time. It was seeping up through your subconscious, but you had it boxed in. And so now it's right there. But in that new awareness, then there's an opportunity to develop a different relationship with it. So like for me, the military stuff, I still remember all the things that happened to me, but they're not like in my central nervous system. They brought them to the surface and then in some ways allowed them to pass. But even that's not one and done. There's this saying that, the deeper the trauma, the more times it needs to be let go. So it takes work, but I think these plants and these compounds can really help that. And yeah, we've had people that have come down. There's some people we don't know who they will be, but it's a percent, in that region, percent or two maybe, that you'll give them a high dose of mushrooms, they'll have no experience, none, and they'll lay there. And for someone that's coming down with the hope of having a pretty significant breakthrough, and they took this time off work and they paid a lot of money, it can be really disappointing, it can be really disappointing. But that's just the reality. You can plan to climb a mountain and have bad weather. It's hard to predict, but I think for us, what we want to do is just be as open book with people about the possible outcomes, the potential risks, and not oversell it. Just be fact-based with the data that we have and what we see. And it's not a panacea, but for some people, for some things, it's incredibly positive.
And how does somebody know if they're right for a spiritual retreat like the one that you guys offer?
It's a good question.
Or what kinds of qualifications do you guys look for to see whether somebody would be a right fit for going to one of your retreats?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest kind of gates for us are, how is that person today? So we're just not set up to handle folks that are in really bad states, suicidal ideations, high levels of drug use, we don't do people that are currently on prescription psychiatric drugs, not because there's necessarily like a contraindication with the drugs, just because that's a signal of some underlying stability that's being medicated. And we're not doing medical work, we're not suited for that. And so we're looking for people that are generally well, that are working, most the guests that come down, they're looking to, we hear people, have sentiments like, I just feel stuck. I want to make change and I haven't been able to make change. But generally they're well, they're not unstable. They're doing okay. We have people come down that say they want to process a loss, like the death of a loved one, or they just lost a job and they just once they want to process something and then, honor it, not forget it, but move past it. I think our experiences are really good for that. We have a lot of people come down that are kind of high performers and they want to get to the next level, like executives or athletes, that just like someone would go on a meditation retreat to learn better self-awareness, learn how to balance the central nervous system and get a bit of a tune-up. I think the experiences are really good for people that are looking for that. People that are looking to develop more connection, more empathy with others, with nature, get their mind out of the way, right? The mind can get in the way sometimes from allowing us to connect with others. And so all those types of looking to go from doing pretty good to doing even better are all good kind of desired outcomes that are a good fit for our program.
And do you have any potential growth plans in the future? Do you have any ideas or hopes as to where do you hope that this intersection between healthcare and spirituality might go in the next 10 years?
I'm hopeful that I don't think it's a top-down thing that's going to happen, because there's really entrenched interests that like the system the way it is, and it's a good business model the way it is. And so I don't see them on their own making dramatic change. But I think because people can learn so much now on their own and are caring more about things and are fed up with the system, or kind of demanding change, I think there is this more grassroots type effort around more preventative health, holistic well-being, as opposed to the late stage, really expensive intervention that we do in the Western healthcare system. And along with that, I think that people are realizing that this idea of spirituality, it's not as woo as we thought it was. And there doesn't need to be this divide. I mean, we sit here talking here today, and I mean, whether you look at biology or chemistry or cosmology or physics, we're spinning at something like 1,000 miles an hour, rotating around this huge ball of fire, rotating around a galaxy. Some physicists would say we're traveling at the speed of light. And so I just say that it's like there's something going on that's pretty profound that we don't have a clue of, right? And so I think that this idea that there is some intelligent design or there's some innate wisdom in us that we can tune into, we should at least be open to that, because there's all these other things that are like phenomena that we have no clue about what's happening. And I think people are starting to see that. And I think we'll be able to like measure around some of these things more as we go. I mean, Reiki's an interesting example. Reiki, energy medicine, where some people, or Joe Dispenza's work, right? Like, I mean, he's studying it where people have measurable biological chemical changes in their body after a week of meditation. Where's that coming from? In Western medicine, we have the placebo effect. Well, how the hell does that happen? No one knows, but it's real. Your consciousness, what you believe, has a dramatic impact on outcomes. And so there's all this, anywhere you look, there's all these things that are happening that should make us humble ourselves a bit into accepting that there may be some things that are happening kind of behind the scenes or below the surface that we should pay attention to. And Reiki, that's a good example of the top down. It's probably not going to happen. It wasn't hospital administered. Well, there's an article in the New York Times a few years ago that I love, but it says there's no scientific reason why Reiki should work. So why does it? And it's becoming available at a lot of hospital systems where you can have someone come in and do energy work on you. And that didn't come from the administrators. It came from...
Are we talking like chakras?
Yeah, that's related. Yeah, it's related. But Reiki is a type of energy medicine where people will be near a practitioner, will be near a patient and will, transfer something to them, right? And there's people that train in this. And we're starting to study it, and there is impact there, but the hospital system never would have brought that in on their own. But there was enough ground root support saying, hey, why isn't this here? That now it's starting to pop up. So I think we'll see those type of changes happen where people are like, no, maybe we need to, instead of having people in the hospital with windows that don't open and never be able to be outside, maybe we need to be able to have people be able to go out and get some sunshine during the day or get some fresh air, right? And I think that's happening. And there's examples of healthcare systems around the world that don't look like the United States, where it's just a pill or a hospital stay. It's trying to live better, be more preventative.
Yeah, and I love Dr. Peter Attia's work on that, as he's one of the few doctors that have become outspoken, and the fact that we need to be proactive about healthcare, and that for all of the centuries past, doctors have only been reactive and solving issues with a pill and not preventing them from happening. And so I certainly hope that we're in a new phase of society where we've seen this emergence of spirituality without religion.
Yeah.
As people realize you don't need to believe in a God to have a connection with yourself or the universe or some higher existence.
Yeah, exactly. You can go direct. You don't need a big building or an intermediary. You can develop these connections on your own. And I think that's what we're trying to help people do, is reconnect on a personal level without the need of some external support.
Yeah. And whether that's through psychedelics or meditation, it seems that there's an ever expanding amount of resources available for people interested in this area of developing themselves further. And so I'd like to ask if there are any resources, whether there are any authors, books, even blog posts, and anything that you might recommend that people look at if they're just wanting to dip their toes in the water and see whether this type of retreat could be helpful for them.
Yeah. How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, I think, is an excellent book.
Yeah, I love How to Change Your Mind. In some ways, he brought that to mainstream and really shared in such great detail to his ability to recall the experiences and describe them in words. And as you know, these experiences are hard to put into words and put it in a way that I think expanded so many people's perspective that these are not just drugs that are, it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be a hippie, and it's not necessarily something that you have to hide from those around you, that it is something that we're starting to recognize as a society that has medicinal benefits. And I hope that we will continue to see this integration of these types of drugs into everyday life.
Yeah, me too. The other book I was trying to think of that I really like is called Stealing Fire. And
Mm.
then one of my all-time favorites by John Kabat-Zinn, who's a meditation instructor, is Wherever You Go, There You Are.
Mm.
So that's a
Yeah, that's a
few.
great book.
Great book, right? Yeah.
And so I think we're at the end of the podcast for the most part. So Neil, I absolutely, it's been a pleasure to have you. I really appreciate you sharing your journey and some of the insights that you've gained in helping to operate this type of retreat. And I think for anybody who's interested, you can check out BeckleyRetreats.com. We'll put that in the show notes, obviously. And I believe you offer a range of experiences that seek to help people kind of overcome some of these issues that they may encounter in their life.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully maybe we can get you down on a program sometime.